Welcome back. So this might be a little bit of a polarizing topic. Over the last few years, I have really focused on diving in deep to things that I am interested in. Before, I wasn't really ready, I guess. I was worried about like what other people would think. I kind of left that behind. That's basically how I started in my new career. I was interested in it and I wanted to see what it was like working with animals, so that's what I did. And I just kind of carried that over to all of my other interests. So one of the main things I was interested in was tarot. I've always been interested in occult things, spiritual energies, and nature and things like that. All of that kind of occult new agey stuff. Very much hippie, which is what my aesthetic was in high school. And I literally wrote a paper about Wicca for English class. I started by buying a few decks and just kind of flipping through them and drawing cards and things like that, but I didn't really dive into everything about tarot until like 5 years ago. I moved away from my hometown and I started this new career, and part of that was kind of starting anew with everything that I wanted to learn, and part of that was really diving into and learning tarot. If you don't know what tarot is, it is a system of divination, but it's also a spiritual tool. It is a deck of 78 cards. They are split into two groups, so you have 22 of the major arcana and then 56 minor arcana. So each of these cards tells its own little contained story within a much larger story arc. The larger story arc is basically focused on all of the archetypes of different people and events that happen throughout a person's lifetime. So you'll also hear about some other decks, which are oracle decks. There are also some cultural specific cards of divination. So I have been kind of exploring all of those avenues as well, because when I get into a new topic, I kind of like just want everything in my brain as fast as possible, and so I kind of go down all these different avenues and all these different rabbit holes. So in order to learn the tarot, the first thing I kind of did, and the first road I went down, was through books, obviously, because I wanted to treat it like any other subject I would learn. So basically I wanted to have a sense of understanding and knowledge about it that was at the level of an academic understanding. I was kind of treating it as like these books were like my textbooks. Drawing cards were basically like the labs. So the first book I started reading was 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack. And you'll hear a lot about this book because it is kind of a quintessential book when you're beginning to learn tarot. A lot of, major writers on the subject have referred to it as like the Bible for tarot reading and tarot analysis. I figured it was a good one to start with. And it took me a while to read this book because I literally filled this entire notebook with notes from it. So Pollack really goes in deep with every single card, all of the symbology, all of the different interpretations. So there are lots of different ways to shuffle, to spread, and to interpret the cards. Some people will interpret all the figures in each of the cards as actual people in their life. Some will just kind of take the story and the theme of that story as the message. Some people will kind of take it in a more literal numerological way, where if you draw the 7 of Pentacles and you're sitting under a tree with 7 apples on it, and what does that mean? There are lots of different ways that people, want to interpret it, and so she goes into each of those. Like if you are reading it as like a person in your life, this could be the type of person you're, looking at. If you're reading it as a theme and a message, these are some words and some things to think about in this story. She also goes into like what all the colors mean and what the number of the card means and things like that. So it's very extensive. What I found really helpful about Pollack's writing is that she describes the entire deck as kind of a life journey. So you have the Fool, who starts out as like an innocent, trusting, eager person who wants to learn things, and then you end with the person in the world who is very much enlightened by all of their life experiences, and they've gained all this wisdom from everything they've been through, and they've kind of reached this like quintessential completely enlightened being. So I also took a few little like community classes, I've been to some lectures, and I think I've also learned a lot from all of the guidebooks that have come with all of the decks. Whenever you get a new deck, it will usually come with some sort of guidebook, or a little white book is what we usually call it. That book will have the deck's creators' own interpretations of all the cards and their own philosophy about tarot and, you know, reading the cards and things like that. So I've found that really helpful, because there are different ways that people look at things and how they describe them and what they interpret them as that I would have never put it together. One example of that is with the Six of Cups. So for example, if you read Pollock's description of the Six of Cups, it talks a lot about like nostalgia, childhood memories, joy from those memories. And then with a new deck that I acquired, the main buzzword for that card is innocence, which I kind of never would have thought, but makes complete sense when you hear it. Like, because nostalgia and childhood memories would really trip me up in readings, because I'd be like, why do I need to think about my childhood right now? I don't understand. But with having that buzzword of innocence, it made me kind of reframe it and think about what I might be dealing with at that time in terms of like, you know, innocence and naivety. And so another main thing when I've been, you know, teaching myself tarot is adopting a daily practice. So tarot is like any other thing you're trying to learn. It is a practice, and it takes time to develop this, you know, skill and get used to interpreting the cards. Not that you shouldn't refer to your guidebooks, it just makes it easier for you to like tap into what the messages are and what the cards are saying. So how do I use them and why? I get this question so much from people in my life, and I never know how to answer it. For a little context, I'm an only child. My parents are a little bit more conservative. They're like liberal left leaning, but they're conservative as far as like interests and things. Was kind of always worried about what they would think if I, you know, wanted to try this, and I was worried about them, you know, not being open. That's why it took me until I was like 25 to start. I completely understand if that's where you're coming from, and I would say to not let that dictate what you're interested in and what you want to learn about, because there are so many different ways of thinking out there. Worrying about what someone else thinks shouldn't shut you off from exploring that. So moving away from my hometown really kind of let me let my weird side out in a way. I had been worried about what other people would think, but in the indomitable words of Agatha Cromwell, being normal is vastly overrated. So when I started, I didn't know exactly why I wanted to use tarot. Like I didn't think like I want to use this for this specific reason. I was just interested in it. So I honestly think it was, in the beginning, it was a way for me to kind of learn about myself and like how I make decisions and how I can navigate this life and have fun, and I just love learning about things. So it was just another interesting topic that like not a lot of people were into, so I was like, I'm gonna learn it because it's weird. But I also really love like talking about symbolism, talking about stories and things like that, which tarot is basically a big symbolic narrative, which is right up my alley. But as I started to pull my daily cards and really apply those interpretations to my life, it kind of became almost like a free therapy to me. Obviously, it's not a replacement for real therapy. So in tarot, I essentially found a way to have an honest conversation with myself and what was going on in my life. And it really helped me center myself and figure out the best way for me to move forward with whatever I was dealing with. And I think a lot of people think of tarot as like a woo-woo, spiritual, like, you know, seance or something like that. It is like meditation for me. It's like a guided meditation almost, because it's a way for me to take time by myself, focus on something, meditate on the questions I have or the feelings I'm feeling, and come up with a way to move forward that feels the best for me. So I really took solace in this daily practice when we lived, before we moved to Arizona where we lived, because life was pretty chaotic at that point. A couple of things that happened were one of our vehicles got stolen 3 times, and then our other vehicle got wrecked. And then I had difficulties at work with management and things like that. So it was really, really chaotic time, and it was hard for me to stay grounded and stay centered in like who I was. So having something that I could turn to every single day that kind of helped pull me out of that process and helped me to you know, look at these situations in as objective a way as possible. It helped me to like check in with myself and really figure out like what was causing me strain and what was beneficial to me and what I needed to let go and things like that. So it was really helpful to me to have something to go to every day to be like, this is my time and this is when I can think about these things and feel what I need to feel and then move on and have a plan for how I'm gonna move on. Now, this might be a little bit of a hot take. Tarot really reminds me of a version of going to therapy, but also a version of prayer in a way, which is basically what meditation is. I don't see it as any different as someone going to a person for advice or, you know, praying to a deity or opening a holy book to look for advice and look for a way to move forward. At its core, tarot cards are just a way for me to help understand myself and to help understand the world around me. So for me, I use it less as like a divination tool of like, when will I meet the love of my life? Because I already have. It's more of how can I cope with the world and situations around me that are out of my control. So I have my daily practice, and then I also use the cards to do larger spreads relating to specific certain situations that I might be dealing with. I'll show you a recreation of a spread I did. So I recently was really feeling betrayed and hurt by a coworker, and it really led to me floundering in my emotions and wondering what I was even doing with my life and not knowing what to do next or how to move forward. And I felt so angry and hurt, and I was having a breakdown. And so, you know, on my day off, I decided to do the spreads. I actually use a different kind of deck for this reading. It's not a tarot deck, but it serves the same function. So these are the medicine cards, which is a Native American animal-centric divination deck. And I decided to pull a spread that is mentioned in their guidebook, and it's called the Pathway Spread. Now, I won't go into too much detail, but this spread literally was like a light bulb went on over my head, and I felt like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. And I want to be clear that it's not because this is a particularly favorable spread. Like, it wasn't just telling me, oh, you're great, whatever is happening, don't worry about it, you're awesome. So for example, the skunk and the badger are in the past and present positions. So the skunk speaks to one who is like assertive in their attitude with no real sympathy for those who don't meet their standards and don't respect their reputation. And then the badger speaks to someone who is quick to anger, often expresses their feelings without thinking about the consequences of those. And these two were me to a T. This is literally how I had acted in this situation, like at the beginning of it. So the situation I was talking about was kind of like spread out over a month. And so what had happened in the past was like literally how it described. So not only is this how I acted in this situation, but they are two very essential aspects of my personality that I am constantly trying to work on. But sometimes, depending on my level of burnout, they come to the surface and I just let them run because I'm so like, you know, stressed out in whatever situation that is. And my burnout was really high during this time, so it just kind of came out. And I can admit that I did let them do that in this instance. So reading emails from this time and this situation, you, like any outsider could tell that like that's what was happening and that's what I was doing. So the other one that really hit home to me was the rabbit in the position of something that is working against me in this moment. So the rabbit is the embodiment of fear and worry. One of the quotes I wrote down from the guidebook is, "What you resist will persist." And I can tell you that in the moments leading up to this reading and why I decided to sit down is because I felt so much fear and so much worry because I was scared and I didn't have a plan, and everything was, you know, it was really a kind of a high anxiety point for me because I was like, what am I gonna do? What's the point? Like, I don't have a plan, and it was stressing me out. Like that, all that worry and fear was kind of taking over my mind that entire day. It really was like calling me out. This is what's happening. Don't make it something that it's not. It is fear and worry, and it's holding you back. So I chose to listen to the rest of this reading and use it as a way to move on from the situation. I did, and I continue to ground myself every day and remind myself of, you know, these messages in this reading, and it really has helped me move on from the situation and put it behind me. I'm able to focus my actions every day on filling my cup and not worrying about what's happened in the past and moving forward. And this was one of the few readings where I genuinely felt different after the reading, and for the better this time, but like it really physically felt better. Now, all readings aren't going to be like this, of course. I used to do a daily spread where it would be 3 cards and it would say, what can I expect from today? What do I need to take with me? And what do I need to leave behind? And I would draw like a card of joy and happiness in the leave behind position, and I would be like, well, I don't want to not be happy, like I want joy and happiness all the time with me. And that's where your interpretation is going to come in. So it might be that you don't have to worry about that at this time, or maybe you have other things that you need to be focusing on instead of like just being happy. It may be simply saying there aren't any celebrations today, it's just a normal day. There are different ways to interpret that rather than just like don't be happy. So right now I'm trying a new daily practice where I am drawing a card in the evening instead of the morning, and I'm kind of using it as a guide to my daily journaling. The question I ask will be, what do I need to take away from today? Then I have that card to focus on as I'm reflecting on my day. And then I will usually at the end of journaling, I will say, okay, this card is telling me this message, so I am going to keep that with me when I go into tomorrow. I also do month ahead spreads, and then whenever I get a new deck, I always do the Little Red Tarot deck interview, which I will link down below. It's a good way to introduce a new deck and to get familiar with the imagery and the messaging and, you know, how that deck interprets specific cards as well. So I really like it as just kind of a dip your toes in the water with a new deck. I have been reading pretty consistently for about 4 years now just for myself, and so I'm still really a beginner. So I'm continuing to read tarot books. So the next book I'm gonna read is Kitchen Table Tarot by Melissa Sayanova, and I'm so excited about reading it because I hear about it all the time and how wonderful it is to have her interpretation. And I've also started watching a lot of tarot YouTubers and they've really helped inform my practice and kind of opened my eyes to different ways of interpretation, different spreads, working with the cards in different ways, like pairings and things like that I would never have thought of. So YouTube, and I'm sure TikTok, I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know, but I'm sure all of TikTok and things like that are great resources for if you're learning and if you want to like kind of take your practice to the next level and open it up to new ways of doing it, new ways of thinking. The tarot YouTubers have also been a really bad influence for me because I described it to my husband as like watching some of these YouTubers and like their videos on their deck collections and things like that as like my version of the Home Shopping Network, because when I see a deck that I like, I am literally immediately on my phone trying to figure out how I can get it now. That's a little bit about my tarot practice and how I'm continuing to learn. If you have any questions or comments down below, I'd love to geek out with you over tarot cards and oracle cards and all of the different cards. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.